So my goal for this episode was to have Sam solo until he meets up with Minthara, then they duo for the rest of the episode. Sam was enjoying the solo challenge so much though that once he meets up with Minthara, he just keeps soloing till the end of Act 2. Sam went out to solo in the first place because he chose the evil path of embracing his illithid powers and siding with Minthara. She convinced him that slaughtering the Grow people was necessary because our great Worm Lord commanded us to do it. He could have ejected the worm from his head to save the Grow people, but thought its powers were needed to help save the world. And Sam's now going solo because his companions are very angry at him for killing the Grow people.
What's there to think about? Goblins spilled blood, but we survived. That's all that matters.
I was too hasty to judge you. I thought you witless, gutless, unimpressively bland. You've gained my respect, and more still, my yearning. Perhaps one night soon, I will come to your bunk and take what is mine.
You can give other companions illithid powers, but since Sam's solo, I thought let's just give them all to him. This one's a gap closer that can knock people back, and this one's an AoE knockback, but like many of these powers, never usually has a good enough chance to hit to warrant using it. And I'm not sure if that's because Sam's not a spellcaster or why that ends up being, but the only ones we end up really using are the ones like this one, which increase our damage. It does make you take damage every turn, but later on there's ways to get multiple attacks off per turn, so later on we'll probably end up using it. With this one, every time Sam hits someone with a range attack, their dex will lower by 1, and this one can give a group of enemies disadvantage, which again doesn't ever seem to have a good chance to hit. I've noticed it's like 10% on bosses. I find a good use for this scroll of fire shield against these nasty creatures called mephits. These things can fly, so you can't really run from them, and they have quite a bit of strength in numbers. The strat to soloing these is just chug healing potions and let the fire shield kill them. And those mephits are guarding a mithril ore, which is required to craft an item at this forge, which is also being guarded. Sam's able to solo this by running over to this spot right after the boss spawns. The trick here when smashing the dude is he's got to have part of him on the platform and part of him touching the lava, because normally after you slam him he becomes invulnerable and you can't slam him again, but as long as part of him is touching the lava then you can slam him immediately after, which I don't think was an intended mechanic. Next turn we pop an invisibility potion because some mephits spawn, and since we're invisible they now attack the Forgemaster. Every 2 turns I believe the lava goes away and you have to turn this wheel to spawn more lava, and since the Forgemaster is still standing in it he is susceptible to damage. Because he's preoccupied with fighting the mephits he doesn't move, so we can slam him again, and the next turn we can slam him again, and that's it for the fight. The boss drops a helmet that Sam can't use because it's heavy armor, but we can now use the forge to craft this shield that can knock people down in melee when they hit Sam, and when they miss they get increased chance to miss on their next 2 turns. Near the Grymforge is a giant flying octopus creature, and if it detects Sam it could just fly up to him and start wailing on him, but right now he's not detected, and every time Sam shoots the boss it does a roll on whether he gets detected or not. And I do feel like I got lucky in my first attempt here because we did not get detected by the boss until it's pretty much dead, and we're able to finish it off before it can react. The boss drops a necklace that mainly can frighten a target, and the damage spell seems kind of weak. I don't think it's something Sam would ever use. Behind the boss we can barter for an item, which is the final piece for an Ice Mage staff. We found the other 2 pieces at different parts of the Underdark. If we take a boat from the beach and head back through the Grymforge, we make it to Act 2, where we run into these scouts, and poor Eunice over here did not get the memo that you don't drop your arrows in the Shadow Curse lands, and if you do, just don't pick them up. If we had a full party here, I'm sure we could have saved these guys, but I don't think they're that important to the story. So we just run away and make it into town and grab this chest piece, which sounded super OP, adds dex to our armor class, but all armors do this. And all they meant by this was it's not capped at +2 like other medium armors. So we only end up getting +2 armor over our current chest piece, but we lose the balance effect, so I'm not even sure if it's worth. Also from that trader, we found our first cloak, which gives armor and magic protection. This guy's a fellow wormhead, and turns out he's got orders to basically destroy the town by kidnapping its guardian, Isabel. She's protecting it with some kind of light spell that stops the undead from overrunning it. To ensure we get the first move off, we pop this elixir and position ourselves between Isabel and Marcus. And this is important because Marcus will now fly away from Isabel towards the other townspeople. So now we just gotta protect her from some demons which aren't that strong. And once I figured out the first part of keeping Marcus from two-shotting her, I didn't have to save scum anymore on the fight. While we were fighting the demons, Marcus was getting overrun by the townspeople, and we're able to finish him off for a pretty measly 150 XP. I've been noticing you do not get much XP for killing bosses. We yoinked the worm from his head, plus a ring that can cast invisibility, and this other spell Blur makes it harder for enemies to hit. For saving the town, we get a pretty useless buff that protects us against the lesser shadow curse, but our cleric has 2 spells that protect us against the lesser shadow curse, and she's able to maintain them on Sam from camp. She also gives Sam this buff, which essentially splits his damage taken with her, so while Sam's out soloing, she'll randomly take damage in camp, but can heal it up because she's now got quite a few healing spells, and she doesn't mind a little pain. We found out in the last episode she actually enjoys torture. To protect us against the greater shadow curse, we gotta steal this guy's Moonlantern, and we did have some quote-unquote help from pretty crappy guards, which all had around 50 HP, and like other friendly AI in this game, they're not really of much help. After failing that battle, Sam runs down the patrol and picks it apart from stealth, and the patrol's main boss has some really strange AI. We're not even in stealth here, but he doesn't want to aggro, and instead he'll just infinitely heal himself, which I guess is probably worse than him aggroing. I also try using these arrows that are supposed to stop him from healing, but they don't work. You can see even with the anti-heal debuff on, he's gaining HP. Back in Act 1 inside the cave behind the Null boss, we found a bottle that can summon one of these flying octopus things. It's going to help us with the boss, although it is hostile to everything, so we have to keep our distance. It's not able to solo the boss, so we have to help it out, and we are able to finish out the boss for a measly 150 XP, and then we get another measly 150 XP for finishing off the octopus thing. It doesn't drop any loot, but the spider elf drops a versatile longsword which does quite a bit of damage with the psychic modifier. Its ability can web a target, but can only be used once per short rest. More importantly, we get the Moonlantern, and if you let the pixie out, she gives you a buff that protects against the greater shadow curse, so now we can freely move about the Shadowlands. We come across this boss who asks us for a gold piece, so we give it to her, which ultimately is pointless because she keeps asking for more and more gold pieces. We accuse her of being a scammer, and since Sam's a rogue, he knows all about tricking people, so he gets an advantage on the dialogue check, and we get to roll 2 dice. We fail the next dialogue check, but use an inspiration to reroll and do end up passing it. And we get that inspiration back, plus quite a bit of XP, and she drops this mace, which is probably good for a melee build, because you can't roll low damage with it. We get quite a bit of gold from this boss. On the ground, there's 600 gold total that we can pick up, plus in the safe behind the boss, there's another 500. We make it to Moonrise, which is where Minthara told us to go in the previous episode, and she's about to be reprimanded for failing to retrieve an artifact, which may be the one that Sam has now. I'm not sure how they even knew about it though, and I thought her job was to slay the Grow people, which she did with a crappy goblin army, and that was no easy task. She could not have done it without our help, so I'm not even sure why they're mad at her. Sam uses his worm powers to convince the orc girl that it was the goblin's fault and not hers, and the boss of Moonrise Towers says to take Minthara below, where someone will decide her fate. He now asks us what should be done with the goblins, and Sam tells him that they mean well and he should just let them go, and he disagrees, which is strange because we didn't fail a dialogue check here. I guess his mind was already made up.
Kill them, quickly.
What? No! You creaking old bag of shit!
Downstairs, Minthara is being tortured, and we pass the first dialogue check telling them to leave her torturing to us. The next dialogue check's much harder, and we use all 4 of our inspirations to try to pass it, but ultimately fail due to Sam's lack of wisdom. Sam tries to tell him to stop, but it's no use. We're gonna have to force him to stop. In this fight, Minthara is being focused, so I use an invisibility scroll on her, which is of no use because she attacks next turn and breaks out of invisibility, and they end up killing her, and since she's not technically a part of our party, we can't use a scroll revive on her. We use a silencing arrow on one of the guards and get a lucky crit, and our luck holds as Sam resists 2 confusion spells. It was weird because the last turn we silenced one of the guards, so I'm not sure how it casted. Sam's able to finish off one of the guards with a sneak attack, and the fight becomes really easy now. We just 2v1 the other guard. Before that fight, I bought a couple things from the Moonrise vendor. This bow's base damage is the same as ours if Gale enchants it, but I believe it gets an extra +2 damage damage from Sam having a pretty high strength modifier. And this polearm is really cool. It gives advantage when attacking as a reaction, and there's this trait that makes it easy to attack with the reaction if Minthara is standing near Sam. I try to give Minthara the weapon, and despite her being controllable, she will not pick it up. She prefers the common scalpel thing she was previously using, I guess. We use an invisibility scroll on her and try escaping via the roof, but she does not want to go that way, which is odd because you're not told which way to go, even though I think Minthara should be familiar with this layout. Like, I think she's been here before, so you'd think she'd be able to guide us here, but no, we have to find it ourselves, and eventually we do find the way. It's through this pit. Minthara still refuses to pick up a weapon, so I try to make her use this mace as an improvised weapon, but she cannot. She can, however, throw the mace. 1 damage, wow. In the previous episode, we freed these gnomes and told them we'd find their friend in Moonrise, and pretty much by accident, we find him trapped behind this wall.
Make it to Baldur's Gate! I must!
We make it down to the dock as we're about to get chased down by a bunch of guards, and thankfully none of them are casters, or they probably could have set fire to our boat or put a leak in it or something. Minthara finally joins us, and unfortunately her stats get lowered down to the same amount of stats you have on pretty much any other companion, which I'm not sure the design choice for this. Minthara was way harder to get than any other companions, and in order to get her you had to throw out 3 other companions. There is a mod that buffs Drowse, and I might end up using that in the next episode, because yeah, they did Minthara pretty dirty with that whole thing. You can make 2 items at the Grymforge, so we make her this heavy armor that has some decent stats. She's gonna accompany Sam for a while and helps us with this next dialogue check.
I love this time of night.
Wait, not that one. This guy wants to cure us from I'm not sure what, but Minthara convinces him that the sisters are not ready, and because I dual spec her into a wizard, she now gets advantage in this next dialogue check. By rolling a 20, she convinces him to be the test dummy, and I'm just warning you guys, this next scene is pretty brutal. If you're eating, I'd recommend looking away. We get quite a bit of XP, plus what I'd say is a pretty underwhelming amulet. It only procs on humanoids and can only be used once per long rest on crits. I personally think effects like this should not have that long rest limit, because as I've been playing through the game, I've been trying to limit the amount of times I long rest, but let me know what you guys think in the comments. A bit later, we run into this boss guy, Raphael, who warns us about an upcoming powerful foe, which is a bit concerning because he's got a ton of HP. I guess the higher-ups didn't get the memo that we broke Minthara out of Moonrise, because we still have this quest to find a guy named Balthazar. Before the skeleton can direct us to him, we get ambushed by what I think are this temple's guardians. Minthara does some good work on these guys. And while she's distracting, Sam's able to lockpick this really tough to open door. He had to roll a 30 to open it. Behind the door is Balthazar, the guy we've been looking for, and from what I've gathered, we probably have to kill him later in a pretty difficult fight, so it's really ideal if we can kill him here. By positioning Minthara and Sam in the doorway, he can join the fight that's happening behind us, but his minions are too fat and they end up getting stuck. He gets picked apart by mobs outside, and we use his minions to now tank for us in a pretty even fight. Inside Balthazar's room is a scroll of an ability he uses during the fight, which is going to come in handy later. Plus Balthazar drops this necklace that can raise a pretty crappy undead minion once per long rest. Further in the temple, we start this fight by killing what I guess was this guy's pet. What the fuck? So that didn't work. Next attempt, we try leaving the pet alone and we just ambush him. The boss keeps getting the first move off because he has more initiative, so we had Gale craft this Elixir of Vigilance to give us more initiative, and the reason why we're going to have Gale do it is he's not currently doing anything, so I respec him into a Transmutation Wizard, and he now gets a chance to turn 1 potion into 2 if he passes a Medicine check. Medicine is based on Wisdom, so we increase his Wisdom up to 19 with a perk. Transmutation Wizards also get a series of useful buffs at level 6. Dark Vision at 60 feet is the same range as Sam's bow, and it's helpful because if the area is not well lit, Sam will get accuracy penalties. Sam now gets the first move after we start the fight, and this is key because he's now able to leap away to safety. He then ambushes the boss a few more times, and he drops his hand crossbow, which can inflict burning if we hit the enemy while hiding. It also allows us to use a hand crossbow in the offhand, but to shoot with an offhand crossbow, you need to use a bonus action point, and this is bad because we're using that bonus action point to jump away, stealth away, or sprint away. Also, the hand crossbow has 10 feet less range than the bow we're using. Often I've found you have to go into people's sight range to use the hand crossbow, and for mainly that reason, while soloing, we keep using the longbow. One of the boss's minions was a trader who we pickpocket for quite a few scrolls. It also had an epic scroll which I couldn't find a practical use for. Let me know if you know a use for it in the comments. In the temple there's a few trials that we have to pass, and for this one we save having to use an invisibility scroll by having Gale cast invisibility on Sam. Sam has been soloing, but nearby there's a waypoint that Gale was able to just teleport to give him that buff. Before officially beginning the trial, Sam's gonna sneak to the end by unlocking this door, and he just runs over this grease using some boots we got in a previous episode. Once Sam makes it to the end, Gale starts the trial, which spawns a bunch of ghosts in the maze Sam just went through. But Sam already made it through, so he can just grab the item without having to deal with the ghosts. In camp, there's this guy Volo who wants to do an experiment on you. If you let him do that experiment, he'll essentially replace your eye with one that can see invisibility, and I'm not sure if that also allows you to see stealth enemies, but we're able to sneak up on Sam's clone in this next trial and ambush him for a free win. The clone drops this ring, which has a pretty cool effect. I just wish it didn't have that long rest restriction, because again, I've been trying to limit the amount we long rest. For the third trial, we have Gale cast flight on Sam, and he's able to fly to the end of it and retrieve the item. And then for the final one, we have Gale yet again cast invisibility on Sam, and he's able to easily disarm this bookcase because he has advantage with the Cat's Grace buff, giving him advantage on dexterity stuff. After grabbing this book from the bookcase, we put it onto this altar thing, and that opens up a path to get to the Spear of the Night, which we're going to need in a bit. Plus behind this spear, there's by far the best helmet we've come across. It gives magic resist and it makes it easier to crit, which is obviously really good for Sam, so we give it to him. At the end of the temple, our cleric wants to fulfill her destiny by slaying the Nightsong. If you let her do this, I believe all good people in the Shadow Curse lands die, including a potential companion. To keep both the Nightsong alive and the cleric around, we tell her to do what she must, and then we tell her the Nightsong knows something about her. She then chooses to forsake her religion by destroying Lady Shar's spear, and the Nightsong is now saved, and she will quote-unquote help us in the upcoming fights. We're now going to storm Moonrise with the help of Jaheira, the potential companion that would have died if the Nightsong died, and if we use these dialogue options, we can control her in the fight, which is really important because if you don't control her, she just runs in and dies. She's a druid, and they have this really powerful AoE spell that does quite a bit of damage here. You can see the enemy HP values after pretty much just using that ability on turn 1. One of the enemies fires back with an AoE spell of their own, which lasts for quite a few turns, and they're now walking through their own AoE spell, which is now damaging them. Plus we have Jaheira drop another Ice Storm on him, and then we combine that with Balthazar's Scroll of Cloud Kill, and that's pretty much it for these guys. They gotta walk over ice, which slows them down, and they get damaged by 2 AoE spells every turn. From the loot we get an amulet that can restore any spell slot, including higher tier ones, so you could use Ice Storm again, for example. Up in Ketheric Thorm's room, we find a cape that's usable once per short rest, plus this letter that lets you learn about his wife, and I believe this is required for this next dialogue check. At the top of the castle, we tell Ketheric to redeem himself, and we will still have to fight him here, but we've essentially planted a seed that we'll be able to harvest later. The Nightsong is going to help us with this fight by essentially being a distraction, which she's pretty good at doing because even though her AI is horrible, she will resurrect after each turn. Even while hiding, plus an oil of accuracy, Sam only has a 70% chance to hit the boss, and I believe that's because we're so underleveled here. We do get extremely lucky by critting him, and then critting him again the turn after. Once you get him to about half, the phase ends by having him summon a giant tentacle, which slaps the Nightsong back to the floor where she's been for pretty much the entire fight. It then zaps her into his lair, and we'll meet up with them in a bit. As we're heading to him, we can kill a bunch of these level 1 mobs for 140 XP, which is the same amount that we've been getting from killing bosses. I do feel like more attention could have been put towards assigning good XP values to mobs, but I digress. In his lair, we find the absolute that everyone's been worshipping. It's this giant elder brain that can mind control normal wormheads, but not Sam's crew because he has that special artifact blocking it. We find out Ketheric Thorm's job is to conquer the city of Baldur's Gate, and this guy is to play hero and rescue the city. They all leave, and it's just Ketheric Thorm left. Playing off the wife dialogue we chose earlier, we can now persuade him to repent, which skips us having to fight him. We do still have to fight this giant undead skeleton, which I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to fight at level 8. It took me quite a few save scums to find a strategy to beat him. Sam uses an illithid power to open with a crit, and this ability says it recharges once per turn, but that's not actually the case, and according to this post, it's once per long rest. Sam's weapon is coated with drow poison, which sleeps the Mind Flayer, so he can't stun Sam on his next turn, and the Mind Flayer ends up dying to the boss's AoE ability, which can damage his own units. Sam's not technically solo for this fight, as Yurgir is with him, but she was a part of the attack on Moonrise, so I felt like it was okay to have her join us and it'd still be technically considered solo for this fight. Her only real contribution to this fight is she casts long jump on Sam, which he could just use a scroll for, so I'm almost certain we could have sold this without her. With his increased jump distance, Sam's able to leap over to the Nightsong to free her, and like Yurgir, she's pretty useless to this fight. Her only real contribution is she breaks the boss's invulnerability shield, but after that she just ends up on the floor for the rest of the fight, and I don't even think she gets back up. I think she might have bugged out. If we have Yurgir and Sam stealth back behind this ledge, the boss will not cast anything and just ends up skipping his turn until we get him to about half HP. Then he starts casting regardless of if he can see us or not, and then he has this nasty ability that can frighten a target, which makes Yurgir unable to retreat, and she does take a few shots from the boss, so you could argue that she did have some contribution, but in hindsight I really don't think this was necessary because Sam uses Wizardbane Oil, which lowers the boss's casting abilities, so now he's doing less damage, plus he has less chance to hit Sam with any effects, mainly the frighten one. This shield also gives him resistance to effects, plus if he does get feared, he can use the heroine buff to make him immune to it, and that's pretty much it for the fight. Just don't get feared and stand behind the ledge so his minions can't get to you, and GG. Ketheric drops some nice stuff that we'll just end up giving to Minthara, and I'm thinking for the next episode, Minthara and Sam are gonna duo, and I'm gonna install these mods that buff hobbits and drows to make things a little bit more interesting and supplement the fact that we're really underleveled at this point. I think we're like 3 or 4 levels down on where we should be because I've been skipping a lot of side quests. Plus I feel like since Sam's been soloing, he should have got more XP, but the game just shares your XP no matter what, so those mods that are gonna buff Sam and Minthara's race are gonna kind of just offset that.